This balcony loses its direct sun before the afternoon even begins, yet it can still produce tender salad greens, sturdy cooking greens, fresh herbs, crisp radishes, and even a small crop of strawberries. The secret is not finding plants that need no sunlight. The secret is learning where every useful minute of morning sun lands, then giving that light to the crop that needs it most. Most people look at a shaded balcony and see one problem. In reality, the same balcony may contain 3 very different growing zones, and 2 containers only a few feet apart can receive different light, different wind, and very different amounts of moisture. By the end of this video, we will place 15 edible crops into those zones, correct the mistakes that quietly reduce growth, and build a practical food garden for a space that never receives all-day sun. One of the crops most often recommended for partial shade will disappoint you if you place it in the darkest corner. Another may stay green and attractive while producing fewer new leaves than you realize. A third may grow a large top while failing to form the part you actually hope to harvest. So before we talk about seeds, soil, or containers, we need to answer one question. How much usable sunlight does your space really receive? Do not begin with the compass direction alone. An east-facing balcony usually receives morning light, but a roof, neighboring building, solid railing, tree, privacy screen, or upper balcony can change that pattern completely. Stand in the space shortly after sunrise on a clear day. Notice where the first direct rays touch the floor, railing, wall, and shelves. Then return every hour through the morning. You do not need complicated equipment. A few notes on your phone can be enough. Write down when direct sun reaches each area and when it disappears. A bright area without a sharp shadow is receiving strong indirect light, not direct sun. That light is still useful, especially for leafy crops, but it should not be counted in exactly the same way as direct sunlight. Watch the floor as carefully as the top shelf. A solid railing may allow the upper leaves of a plant to receive sun while keeping the root zone and lower leaves shaded. A slatted railing can create bands of light that move across a container. A roof overhang may keep the inner half of the balcony shaded, even while the outer edge receives several valuable hours of direct morning sun. The pattern can also change with the season because the angle of the sun changes. A container that receives excellent light in spring may be partly shaded later, or the opposite may happen. Your first light map does not have to be permanent. It simply gives you a reliable starting point. Now, divide the space into 3 zones. The first is the prime morning sun zone. This is the brightest edge, the highest shelf, or the position that receives direct light for the longest period. It is the most valuable part of the balcony, so do not fill it randomly. Reserve it for crops that lose the most when light is limited, especially plants producing fruit, roots, or large amounts of foliage. The second area is the bright filtered light zone. It may receive a shorter period of direct morning sun, followed by bright indirect light. This is often the most useful zone for leafy vegetables. It is protected from the harshest afternoon heat, yet it remains bright enough for many greens to continue making new leaves. The exact performance will depend on the season, temperature, variety, and local conditions, but this zone can become the main salad and cooking green section of the garden. The third area is the cool protected zone. It may be closer to the wall, near the door, or on a lower shelf. This area can be valuable, but only if it is still bright. Partial shade is not darkness. If a plant cannot cast even a soft shadow for most of the day, grows toward one narrow source of light, or stays wet for a very long time, the position may be too dark. Shade tolerance is not permission to hide a crop behind every other container. Light is only part of this map. Wind and moisture matter too. A hanging basket at the outer edge may receive excellent morning sun, but it may also dry faster because air moves around the entire container. A large pot near the wall may stay moist much longer. A small dark-colored container can warm and dry faster than a larger light-colored one. This is why watering every pot on the same schedule can cause problems. Before watering, feel the growing mix below the surface. Check the actual container, not just the calendar. Container drainage is essential in every zone, especially in protected shade, where water evaporates more slowly. Use a container with open drainage holes and a light, well-draining potting mix designed for containers. Heavy garden soil can compact, drain poorly, and become difficult to manage in pots. Place sources where needed to protect the surface below, but do not allow roots to remain in standing water. Also consider the load on a balcony. Wet growing mix is heavier than dry mix, and many large containers placed together can add substantial weight. Keep access paths clear, prevent water from dripping onto neighbors, and follow the building rules that apply to your space. Before the first planting, make one more practical decision. Choose containers by the mature plant, not by the size of the seedling at the store. A tiny kale transplant can become much wider than a tray of lettuce seedlings. Swiss chard develops a substantial root system and a broad canopy. Parsley remains slower above the soil but benefits from a deeper root zone. Lettuce, arugula, tatsoi, and baby bok choy can use broad window boxes efficiently, while strawberries often benefit from a container that keeps crowns separated and allows fruit to hang away from wet soil. Do not rely on one universal pot size for every crop. The container must hold enough growing mix to buffer moisture and temperature without becoming too heavy for the space. Small pots are easy to move but can dry rapidly. Very large pots hold moisture longer but may be difficult to rotate or relocate after watering. For a balcony, mobility matters. A pot that is technically large enough but impossible to move may prevent you from correcting the light arrangement later. Use stable containers, secure railing planters correctly, and never place a heavy pot where it could fall. A high-quality potting mix should remain loose enough for air to reach the roots while still holding useful moisture. Over time, repeated watering can settle the mix. Add compost or an appropriate container fertilizer according to the product directions and the needs of the crop, but avoid the assumption that more feeding will compensate for weak light. Under low light, a heavily fertilized plant may produce soft, stretched growth rather than strong, balanced growth. Light, roots, water, temperature, and nutrition have to work together. Decide which crops you will direct sow and which you may transplant. Radishes, arugula, spinach, cilantro, and many salad greens are simple to sow directly in their final containers. Kale, Swiss chard, parsley, strawberries, and bok choy may also be started from seed, but healthy transplants can shorten the waiting period for beginners. Whatever method you choose, avoid setting tender greenhouse plants directly into a windy balcony without adjustment. Gradually expose them to the real light, wind, and temperature of the space so they are not shocked on the first day. A morning sun garden can still attract pests. Aphids may gather on kale, mustard greens, bok choy, or tender new growth. Leaf damage may appear on arugula and radish. Slugs can reach low containers in some settings, and spider mites can appear where conditions are hot and dry. Inspect the undersides of leaves, the centers of rosettes, and the points where stems meet. Early detection is easier when containers are not packed together. Use controls suitable for edible crops and follow label directions. The goal is not to create a sealed, sterile balcony. It is to notice small problems before they become large ones. Airflow deserves the same attention as sunlight. Morning dew or irrigation water can remain on leaves longer in shaded positions. Water the growing mix rather than repeatedly wetting foliage, especially late in the day. Remove damaged leaves, keep the floor clean, and leave a little space between containers. A balcony filled with healthy leaves should still allow you to see and reach the plants. Before we choose the first crop, look once more at the lowest shelf. It may appear to be useful planting space, but watch it through the whole morning. If containers above it cast dense shade, that lower level may be better used for supplies, a watering can, or only the most shade-tolerant plants raised toward the front. You do not have to plant every square inch. A productive garden needs light, airflow, and access more than it needs the maximum possible number of pots. Now that the light map is clear, we can begin with the most valuable zone. The brightest edge should go first to the crops that lose the most when sunlight is limited, and the first of those is strawberries. Strawberries belong on this list, but they do not belong in the darkest corner. Give them the strongest morning sun available. A railing planter, elevated pot, or hanging container can work well if the plants receive direct light and the container does not dry excessively. More light generally supports stronger flowering, fruit development, and sweetness. In reduced light, a strawberry plant may remain green and healthy looking, while producing fewer flowers and smaller harvests. That does not mean strawberries are impossible on a morning sun balcony. It means they should receive priority. Choose a container with enough room for the roots and reliable drainage. Keep the crown, where the leaves meet the roots, at the proper level instead of burying it deeply. Water when the mix begins to dry, but do not keep the roots constantly saturated. Hanging containers require especially close attention because they can dry quickly in wind. If the leaves stay lush but flowering is weak, do not immediately add more fertilizer. First ask whether the plant is receiving enough light, whether the weather is suitable, and whether the variety is adapted to your region. Place strawberries where fruit can remain visible and air can move around the leaves. This makes it easier to notice pests, damaged fruit, or overly wet foliage. The red fruit also adds color to the balcony, but the realistic goal is a useful supplement, not a huge commercial harvest. A few properly placed plants can provide occasional fresh berries, while teaching you exactly how much light the outer edge receives. The second crop for the prime zone is radish. Radishes are often included in partial shade lists because they mature quickly and tolerate cool conditions. But they still need enough light to form good roots. In light that is too weak, the tops may become large, while the roots remain small or fail to round properly. That is the crop we warned about earlier. A plant can look vigorous above the soil while disappointing you below it. Use a container deep enough for the type of radish you are growing and space the seedlings according to the mature size of that variety. Crowding is one of the most common reasons radishes produce leaves instead of useful roots. Light, temperature, fertility, and moisture also matter. Very rich nitrogen-heavy conditions can encourage leafy growth, while heat can reduce root quality. Do not diagnose the problem from one sign alone. Place the radish container where it receives strong morning sun without being shaded by tall kale or Swiss chard. Keep the soil evenly moist rather than allowing it to swing from very dry to saturated. Uneven moisture can affect texture and quality. As the root develops, the shoulder may become visible naturally at the soil surface, but there is no reason to pull the plant out just to check it. Look for the top of the root, follow the expected size for the variety, and harvest when it reaches a useful stage. The leaves are also edible when they are healthy and grown without inappropriate chemical treatments. So a radish planting can offer two kinds of food. Still, the main lesson is clear. Shade tolerance does not remove the need for good placement. Give radishes more light than tender lettuce, and they are more likely to reward you below the soil as well as above it. Kale is the third crop for this brighter zone. Compared with tomatoes, peppers, or squash, kale can remain productive with less direct sun, and afternoon shade can be helpful during warm weather. But kale is not a tiny plant. Even a compact variety can develop a substantial canopy, and a mature plant placed at the front can cast shade across several lower containers. Position kale toward the back of an open shelf, at one side of the balcony, or wherever its leaves will not block the morning sun from shorter crops. Remember that the sun arrives from an angle. Watch the direction of the shadow, not just the height of the plant. A kale pot may be harmless in one position, and a major light barrier in another. Use a container large enough to support steady root growth and prevent the plant from becoming top-heavy. Harvest the oldest healthy outer leaves first, leaving the center to continue producing. This method can provide repeated harvests without removing the whole plant. It also reduces excess leaf mass that may shade neighboring crops. Do not strip too many leaves at once. The plant still needs an active canopy to keep growing. Kale may develop more slowly in partial shade than it would in brighter conditions, but slower growth is not automatically failure. Judge the plant by the production of healthy new leaves, its color, stem strength, and overall balance. If the stem stretches noticeably toward the railing, or the gaps between leaves become unusually long, consider moving the pot forward or upward. Swiss chard can stand beside kale as another long-producing crop. Its broad leaves and colorful stems make it visually useful, but its size must be managed. Give each plant room. A crowded chard container can hold moisture between leaves, reduce airflow, and shade smaller plants nearby. A stable pot is important because the leaves can catch wind. Swiss chard can be harvested by taking the outer leaves when they are large enough to use. Leave the central growing point intact. This allows the plant to continue producing over time. In a morning sun setting, chard often performs well in the bright zone or at the brighter edge of the filtered light zone. If summer heat is intense, afternoon shade may protect the leaves from excessive stress. In a cool season, the plant may benefit from every available minute of morning light. Do not place a full-size chard directly in front of a tray of baby greens. Raise the smaller greens, move the chard to one side, or use a compact variety. The best arrangement is not simply based on which crop likes shade. It is based on how the mature shape of each crop changes the light for everything around it. Mustard greens complete the first group. They can produce tender young leaves or larger cooking greens, and many varieties tolerate partial shade. Morning sun, followed by afternoon protection, can help during warmer periods, but mustard is still affected by temperature. Warm conditions can speed flowering and strengthen the flavor. Shade may reduce some heat stress, but it cannot stop seasonal changes. A long container can hold a small succession planting of mustard greens, provided the plants are not overcrowded. Harvest baby leaves early, or allow selected plants to become larger. Young leaves can fill gaps between slower crops. But remember that even quick greens need airflow. If every open patch is planted, the balcony may look abundant for a short time, and then become difficult to water, inspect, and harvest. At this point, the brightest zone contains strawberries, radishes, kale, Swiss chard, and mustard greens. Notice that the crops are not arranged simply from tallest to shortest. Strawberries and radishes receive direct light because fruit and root production can suffer when light is too limited. Kale and chard receive strong light because they support large repeated leaf harvests, but they are positioned so they do not block the rest of the garden. Mustard greens use remaining bright spaces while still benefiting from afternoon protection. As you arrange the prime zone, think in terms of harvest value per patch of light. The brightest position does not automatically belong to the tallest plant. A large kale can tolerate the bright filtered zone reasonably well in some seasons, while a strawberry needs stronger light for flowering and fruit. If the outer edge is narrow, give the most exposed points to strawberries and radishes, then place kale and chard where they still receive direct sun without casting a long shadow over the middle. You can also use height strategically. A sturdy plant stand can lift a radish box above a solid railing. A hanging strawberry container can capture light that never reaches the floor. A low lettuce tray can sit in front of taller chard if the sun angle still reaches it. Every support must be stable, weather-resistant, and safe in wind. Do not improvise a tall stack of loose pots merely to chase sunlight. The first weeks after planting are a useful test period. Mark the position of each container and observe growth rather than moving everything every day. Constant movement can make it difficult to understand what is working. Give plants time to respond, then adjust when a clear pattern appears. A single cloudy week is not enough evidence that a position is unsuitable. Look for repeated leaning, weak new growth, consistently wet soil, or poor development compared with the same crop in a brighter spot. Harvesting is part of light management. When you remove the outer leaves of kale or Swiss chard, more light can reach the containers behind them. When you cut a dense patch of mustard greens or arugula, airflow improves. When a bolting plant has finished its useful leaf stage, removing it can open a valuable space for the next sowing. A container garden is not a fixed display. It changes as plants grow, are harvested, and are replaced. Be careful when combining crops in one pot. A few radishes may fit along the edge of a young kale container at the beginning, but the kale roots and canopy will expand. Lettuce can temporarily occupy open space around a newly planted chard, yet it should be harvested before serious competition begins. Pairing crops is useful only when their root space, watering needs, timing, and mature size remain compatible. A crowded mixed pot may photograph well for a short time while producing less food overall. Color and leaf shape can help you read the garden. Deep green is not always proof of ideal growth, and pale color is not always caused by shade. Compare new leaves with older leaves. Note whether the plant is compact, and inspect the roots and moisture when possible. Nutrient deficiency, waterlogging, heat, pests, and root restriction can resemble light problems. Good observation avoids solving the wrong problem. Morning sun conditions also change through the year. In early spring or fall, cool air may make the bright edge ideal for nearly every crop on this list. During a hot summer, the same edge may become stressful after the sun has heated the railing and containers. A metal or masonry surface can continue radiating heat even after direct sun disappears. Feel the container and nearby wall. If they remain very hot, move tender greens farther inward while keeping strawberries and stronger plants in the best light available. In cooler months, reverse that strategy. Move lettuce, spinach, cilantro, and bok choy toward the brightest positions because heat protection is no longer the main priority. Capture as much morning sun as possible while protecting plants from severe cold according to local conditions. A flexible arrangement will outperform a permanent layout that ignores seasonal change. The next group can move farther from the railing, but one of these greens can appear perfectly healthy while quietly slowing almost to a stop. That is why the middle zone must remain bright, even when it is protected from direct afternoon sun. Leaf lettuce is one of the best starting crops for a morning sun garden. It has a relatively shallow root system, adapts well to containers, and can be harvested as individual outer leaves or as baby greens. Morning sun supports growth, while afternoon shade can reduce heat stress and help tender leaves remain in better condition during warm periods. But lettuce does not grow well in darkness. In weak light, it may become loose, thin, and slow. A practical range often discussed for lettuce is several hours of direct light, and many gardeners use roughly 4 to 6 hours as a useful reference for partial sun. Treat that as a guide, not a guarantee. 4 hours of strong, clear morning sun in a mild climate is different from brief, weak light in winter or intense heat, followed by a very hot afternoon. Variety, temperature, growing medium, watering, and local conditions all influence the result. Use a broad container or window box with good drainage. Avoid planting so densely that the leaves remain wet and pressed together. For continuous small harvests, take the outer leaves and leave the center growing. For baby leaf production, sow more closely but harvest earlier. These are different systems, so do not expect a densely sown baby leaf tray to develop into large, mature heads without thinning. Place lettuce in the bright, filtered light zone, perhaps one step behind the radishes or strawberries. During cooler weather, move it closer to the light. During a hot spell, a position protected from afternoon heat may be more valuable. The plant itself will give feedback. Compact growth and steady new leaves indicate a workable balance. Long, weak stems, pale leaves, or a strong lean toward the railing suggest the location is too dim. Arugula adds a different texture and flavor to the same zone. It can grow quickly in cool conditions and is useful for repeated young leaf harvests. Like lettuce, it may benefit from afternoon protection when the weather warms. However, shade cannot completely prevent arugula from flowering when temperatures and day length encourage that response. If the plant begins to bolt, the leaves may become stronger in flavor and production can change quickly. Sow small batches rather than one huge container all at once. This creates a more useful sequence of harvests and reduces the chance that every plant reaches the same stage together. A small sowing every time the previous patch is established can work better than a rigid nationwide calendar because climate conditions vary widely across the United States. Watch the weather and the actual growth rate. Arugula does not need the deepest pot, but it does need drainage and consistent access to moisture. A shallow container can dry quickly at the exposed edge, even if the balcony becomes shaded later. Check the soil rather than assuming a shade crop never dries out. Harvest leaves while they are tender, and remove plants that have finished rather than allowing them to crowd the next sowing. Bok choy brings more structure to the middle layer. Baby types are especially useful in containers, because they can form compact rosettes without demanding the space of a large, mature plant. Give them enough room to open. If crowded, the leaves overlap, airflow decreases, and the plants may become more vulnerable to stress or disease. Bok choy appreciates bright conditions and cool temperatures. In adequate light, the rosette remains balanced and the stems develop well. In very low light, the plant may stretch, open loosely, or lean strongly. Afternoon shade can be helpful, but a shelf that receives almost no useful light is not the right solution. Use a container that allows an even moisture level and avoid repeated cycles of severe wilting. At the same time, do not keep the growing mix permanently wet. Check below the surface, especially in the middle zone where evaporation may be slower. Space plants so air can move, and so you can inspect both sides of the leaves. These three crops, leaf lettuce, arugula, and bok choy, can create the main edible center of the balcony. Lettuce offers soft, repeated harvests. Arugula contributes faster, spicy leaves. And bok choy provides a more substantial cooking green. They can sit near one another, but they should not be treated identically. Their spacing, harvest style, and response to heat differ. 3 more greens will make this layer look even fuller, but their similar appearance hides important differences in growth habit, airflow, and harvest timing. Tatsoi is the first. Tatsoi forms a low rosette that fits well near the front of a container arrangement. Its dark, rounded leaves can remain compact when the plant receives enough light. This low shape makes tatsoi useful under the edge of a taller crop, but not under dense shade. If the leaves spread widely and the stems lengthen as the plant searches for light, move the container forward. A broad pot or window box works well, especially for baby plants or a small group spaced for mature rosettes. Decide at planting time whether you want baby leaves, outer leaf harvests, or whole plants. The spacing should match that goal. Trying to grow every seed into a full rosette in a crowded box will reduce airflow and produce uneven plants. Tatsoi prefers cooler conditions, so timing matters. Afternoon shade may extend good leaf quality during a mild, warm period, but it will not create cool weather during extreme heat. In a hot region, this may be a cool season crop. In a cooler region, it may remain useful for a longer period. The balcony microclimate matters, but it does not replace the larger climate. Mizuna fits beside tatsoi while adding fine, deeply cut leaves. It can be harvested young for salads or allowed to make larger leaves for cooking. Because its foliage is airy, it may look less crowded than broad-leaved greens, but dense sowing can still limit airflow and make inspection difficult. Mizuna can perform in bright partial shade, especially when protected from intense afternoon heat. Yet it still needs enough energy to replace harvested leaves. If regrowth becomes very slow, the plant may be too shaded, too crowded, too hot, underfed, or affected by root problems. Avoid assuming every slow plant simply needs fertilizer. First, evaluate light, temperature, moisture, and root space. Place Mizuna where morning light reaches the upper leaves, but where it does not have to compete with a full wall of kale. A long planter can hold several plants at different stages. Harvesting selected outer leaves can keep the plants productive, while a separate dense sowing can be used for baby leaves. Now the balcony contains a wide range of leafy crops, but the darkest area remains. This is the moment many shade garden plans go wrong. They assume the plant with the greatest shade tolerance should automatically be placed in the least light. That is not how productive growth works. Shade tolerance means a plant can remain useful with less direct sun than crops such as tomatoes or peppers. It does not mean the plant can produce indefinitely without bright light. The darkest corner may also be the wettest corner. Limited airflow, slow evaporation, and crowded foliage can create more problems than the shade itself. If a lower shelf remains dim for most of the day, raise the containers, move them toward the front, remove a shelf above, or leave the space open. This is also where succession planting becomes valuable. Do not sow every lettuce, arugula, tatsoi, mizuna, and mustard seed on the same day. If they all mature together, you may have more leaves than you can use for a short period, and then very little later. Smaller, repeated sowings create a steadier rhythm. The exact interval depends on temperature and growth speed, so use the plants as your guide. When one group is established, begin the next small batch. The garden now looks full, but the cool, protected zone still has room for 5 crops that may become some of the most frequently harvested plants in the entire space. These plants belong near the door or along an accessible wall, not because they need no sun, but because they benefit from regular checking and frequent kitchen use. Spinach is the first. It is commonly recommended for partial shade because it prefers cool conditions and can struggle in heat. Morning sun and afternoon shade can be a useful combination, but shade cannot erase temperature. If the air and growing mix remain too warm, spinach may slow, become stressed, or bolt even without afternoon sun. Place spinach in a bright but cooler part of the balcony. It should still receive direct morning light or strong indirect light. Do not hide it beneath a dense shelf. In warm climates, spinach may be most successful during the cooler season. In cooler regions, the usable season may be longer. Choosing the right time can matter more than moving the pot a few inches deeper into shade. Use a container with good drainage and maintain even moisture without saturation. Spinach roots need oxygen. A shaded pot that remains waterlogged will not be rescued by the plant's preference for cool conditions. Harvest outer leaves when appropriate, or grow a smaller planting for baby leaves. If growth slows, consider temperature first, then light, moisture, nutrition, crowding, and root health. Green onions are an excellent use of a narrow planter near the kitchen door. They do not require the brightest position, but they still grow better in a bright environment. A container with sufficient depth and drainage can hold a row of plants without taking much floor space. You can harvest green tops carefully once the plants are established, but do not cut every plant repeatedly to the soil and expect endless regrowth. Leaves are the plant's energy-producing surface. A moderate harvest allows continued growth. Some gardeners prefer to harvest whole plants and replant in small batches. Others maintain a group for leaf harvest. Both approaches can work when expectations remain realistic. Green onions also help define the edge of the herb zone. Their upright form takes little horizontal space, making them useful beside parsley or chives. Keep them where you can see the soil surface, because narrow containers can dry faster than expected. Parsley is well suited to bright partial shade and repeated kitchen use. It can be slower to establish than fast salad greens, so patience is important. Once growing strongly, it can provide repeated outer stem harvests. Take mature stems from the outside and leave the center active. Use a container with enough depth for the roots and good drainage. Parsley does not need the prime strawberry position, but it should not be forgotten in a dark, wet corner. Place it where morning light or strong reflected light reaches the leaves. The area near the door is convenient because regular harvesting also gives you frequent opportunities to inspect the plant. If parsley growth is slow, remember that it is naturally less rapid than arugula or mustard greens. Compare the plant with its own normal habit instead of expecting every crop to grow at the same speed. Look for healthy new center growth, good color, and balanced stems. Cilantro belongs near parsley, but it behaves differently. It is strongly affected by temperature and can move quickly toward flowering in warm conditions. Afternoon shade may reduce stress and slow soil drying, but it cannot guarantee that cilantro will remain leafy through hot weather. In many regions, it performs best in cooler parts of the year. Small succession sowings are useful because cilantro can change quickly. Sow enough for regular use, then begin another small batch before the first planting is finished. Avoid crowding the container so tightly that airflow disappears. Keep moisture even, but remember that a shaded pot may not need water as often as an exposed one. When cilantro bolts, it does not necessarily mean you failed. The plant is responding to its life cycle and environment. The flowers can support beneficial insects where allowed, and the seeds are coriander. For a leaf-focused balcony garden, however, the practical strategy is to use cooler timing, afternoon protection, and repeated small sowings rather than trying to force one planting to remain leafy forever. Chives complete the list. Their narrow, upright leaves occupy little space and a compact clump fits well in a small pot. Chives appreciate bright conditions but do not need the most valuable outer edge. Morning sun, followed by bright shade, can support useful growth. Harvest by cutting a reasonable portion of the leaves while leaving enough growth for the plant to recover. Avoid removing the entire clump repeatedly. Keep the container drained and divide an overcrowded clump when necessary. A pot near the kitchen door makes chives easy to use, and frequent small harvests are often more valuable than one large harvest. The herbs and greens near the door should also be arranged by frequency of use. Place chives, green onions, parsley, and cilantro where you can reach them without stepping around the largest containers. A plant that is easy to harvest is more likely to be used while the leaves are at their best. Easy access also encourages quick daily inspection. You may notice dry soil, aphids, yellowing leaves, or a flower stalk several days earlier simply because the pot is in your normal path. Keep simple records for one growing cycle. Note the approximate hours of direct sun, which containers dry first, when each crop begins producing useful leaves, and which plants lean or stretch. You do not need a complicated spreadsheet. A photograph from the same position every week and a few short notes can reveal changes that are difficult to notice from day to day. This information is more valuable than a generic claim that every east-facing balcony receives the same light. When a crop struggles, change one major factor at a time when possible. If you move the container, add fertilizer, change watering, and prune heavily on the same day, you may never know what helped or caused additional stress. Start with the most likely limitation. A visibly shaded, stretching plant should usually be moved to better light before it is heavily fed. A plant in saturated soil needs drainage and watering corrections before more water-soluble fertilizer. Do not interpret every seasonal ending as a failure. Spinach, cilantro, arugula, mustard greens, and bok choy may eventually flower as temperatures and day length change. Lettuce can become bitter or elongated. At that point, harvest what remains useful. Remove the finished plants, refresh the container as needed, and begin a crop better suited to the next part of the season. The productive balcony is a rotating system, not a permanent collection in which every plant must live forever. The same principle applies to strawberries, kale, chard, parsley, and chives, which may remain longer but still need maintenance. Remove damaged leaves, check whether roots have filled the container, renew fertility responsibly, and divide or replace plants when growth declines. Long-lived does not mean maintenance-free. Finally, judge success by useful food and healthy growth, not by comparing a partial shade balcony with a full sun farm. A compact container that provides fresh herbs every week may be more valuable to your kitchen than a larger plant you rarely use. A modest radish harvest can still be worthwhile. The purpose of the layout is to make the best use of the light you have, not to pretend the limitation does not exist. All 15 crops are now in place, but the garden is not finished. The next stage is where a collection of containers becomes a working system. Small mistakes only become visible after the plants begin sharing the same light, wind, and moisture. The first mistake is allowing tall crops to steal light. Stand at the side of the balcony during the morning and look at the shadows cast by kale, Swiss chard, shelves, and hanging containers. A plant may receive sunlight itself while blocking several pots behind it. Move tall crops toward the back relative to the direction of the sun. Place them at the sides, or raise shorter crops. Harvesting a few outer leaves can also reduce unnecessary shading, but do not remove so many that the plant loses its ability to grow. The second mistake is leaving strawberries in an attractive but dim position. A strawberry pot may look decorative near the inner wall, yet flowering and fruiting can decline there. If the plant stays green but produces few flowers, move it toward the prime morning sun edge before reaching for more fertilizer. Light is not the only factor, but it is one of the first to evaluate. The third mistake appears when radishes develop impressive leaves and disappointing roots. Check spacing first, then consider light, temperature, moisture, and fertility. A crowded, warm, overly rich, shaded container can produce a great deal of top growth, Thin correctly, provide stronger morning light, keep moisture even, and choose a suitable season. There is rarely one universal cause. The fourth mistake is watering every container at the same time. The hanging strawberry basket may need water, while the parsley pot near the wall is still moist. The shallow arugula box may dry before the deep kale container. Check each zone and each pot. Insert a finger into the mix. Lift smaller pots to learn their wet and dry weight, and watch how quickly the surface changes. Water thoroughly when needed. Allow excess water to drain, and do not leave containers standing in water. The fifth mistake is ignoring the direction of growth. A plant leaning toward the railing is giving information. It may need to be rotated, moved forward, or raised. Rotation can help balance growth, but it cannot create light where there is too little. If the plant repeatedly stretches in one direction, improve the position. The sixth mistake is filling the balcony so completely that airflow and access disappear. Leaves pressed against walls or neighboring plants stay wet longer and become difficult to inspect. Narrow paths make watering awkward. Dense growth can hide pests and damaged leaves. Remove unnecessary containers. Combine crops only when their needs are compatible, and preserve enough space to reach every plant. Now step back and rebuild the layout in order. At the brightest outer edge, place strawberries where they can receive the strongest morning sun and where air can move around the leaves. Keep radishes nearby in a position not shaded by taller crops. Set kale and Swiss chard toward the sides or back, depending on the sun angle, so their mature leaves do not create a wall. Use mustard greens to fill bright spaces while maintaining airflow. In the bright filtered light zone, arrange leaf lettuce, arugula, bok choy, tatsoi, and mizuna. Place low rosettes toward the front, keep baby leaf boxes accessible, and leave enough room for bok choy to open. Use staggered sowings so the zone contains plants at different stages instead of one large harvest followed by an empty period. In the cool, protected, and easy access zone, place spinach in the brightest cool position, not the darkest location. Add green onions in a narrow planter, parsley in a deeper pot, cilantro in small repeated sowings, and chives in a compact container near the door. This becomes the kitchen zone, where frequent small harvests encourage regular inspection. The exact arrangement will not be identical on every balcony. A glass railing may transmit more light than a solid wall. A white surface may reflect light. A roof overhang may change the usable area. Southern climates may make afternoon protection especially valuable during hot periods, while northern gardeners may want to capture every available ray in cooler seasons. Your plants will respond to these local conditions, so treat the first layout as a living plan. Look for steady new growth, balanced form, healthy color, manageable moisture, and useful harvests. A plant that remains alive but stops producing is not in the best possible location. A crop that bolts during heat may need a different season rather than deeper shade. A pot that stays wet for days may need better drainage, less frequent watering, more airflow, or a brighter position. You do not need to begin with all 15 crops. Start with 3 or 4 that you already eat. Leaf lettuce is a forgiving way to test the middle zone. Green onions or chives make frequent kitchen harvests possible in a narrow container. Kale or Swiss chard can test the brighter zone and provide repeated leaves. Once you understand how quickly each pot dries and how the shadows move, add bok choy, parsley, radishes, or strawberries. A morning sun balcony is not a failed full sun garden. It is a different growing environment with its own advantages. Tender greens may avoid the strongest afternoon heat. Containers may retain moisture longer. Herbs near the door can remain accessible and protected. But those advantages only appear when the space is bright enough, drainage is reliable, and the plants are matched to their positions. The goal was never to find 15 crops that need no sun. It was to use every useful minute of morning light so wisely that a limited balcony could still become a real food garden. Protect the prime edge for strawberries, radishes, and the largest repeated harvest greens. Use the bright middle for lettuce, arugula, bok choy, tatsoi, and mizuna. Keep spinach and the frequently used herbs in a cool, bright, accessible zone. Then observe, adjust, and let the plants show you what the light map missed. Your harvest may be a bowl of lettuce, a handful of cooking greens, chopped parsley, cilantro, chives, or green onion for dinner, a few crisp radishes, and occasional strawberries. That is a realistic and valuable result from a space many people assume cannot grow food at all. Start with the brightest edge. Choose a few crops you already eat, and let the plants show you how the light moves through your space.